My name's Kay Fry. I'm a nurse and I work at Child Care Resources. It's a place that works with daycare providers who babysit kids. So I work with training them on letting them know what to do to take care of kids better in a more healthful way. So some of those things are what I want to pass on to you today. How many people have babysat before already? Okay. How many of you who have babysat before have had a health problem that you didn't know about when you were babysitting? Anybody have a sick kid or something that scared you about the way they were acting, or no? Well, that's great. So everybody took care of healthy kids, yeah? Okay. I'm going to spend some time on some safety issues about young children, especially young children, because they're the ones at greatest safety risk, and I would really like to leave you with some knowledge about that. A lot of it's common sense, and you probably already know that, but we're gonna go over some of that anyway. Then we're going to spend some time on how to recognize when kids are sick, so you know when to get a hold of parents, or some emergency help if they were sick enough. We're going to spend some time on how to take temperatures. Have you guys done that before? How many of you have taken temperatures and know how to read a thermometer? All right. Well, half the group's there. And then we're going to spend some time on how to change diapers, which you have to do on occasion, right? Okay, some safety things. I want you guys to tell me what you know, because you know a lot already, especially those of you who have... Or, does everybody have a brother and sister at home? Raise your hand if you do. Is there anyone who doesn't have a brother and sister at home? Okay, a few of you. If they're smaller than you are, then you know a lot of the stuff that they can get into trouble with already, don't you? Who can tell me? Let's talk about a little baby who's not even walking yet. What would they get into trouble doing? Yes? Playing with Legos. Okay, Legos are those little building blocks. Duplos are for babies, Legos are not. What do they do with those Legos? Yeah, what do they do if they find them? Okay. Legos are small enough that they get stuck in their throat. And what do young babies always do when they get something in their hands? They stick it in their mouth, right? That's how babies learn things. Instead of using their hands to learn things and play, they play with their mouths when they're young. So that's the first place that it goes. So any infant up to about 6 months, you really have to watch for that. They can be crawling around and find little pieces of fuzz. They can be crawling around and find little pieces of toys. So one of the first things I would suggest you do when you get to a household, and many parents are pretty aware these days of preventing accidents, especially if they have infants, but some haven't thought of that yet. It might be a good idea to really look around the space that you're going to be in and look for those little small things, especially if you have an infant who's crawling around. Okay, what other things do babies get into that they shouldn't, besides small things that they can put in their mouths? Medicine, good. Okay. Poisonings are a real common accident in young children. And it's not as much of a problem actually with babies as much as preschoolers. A 2-year-old, notorious for getting into things like that that they shouldn't. So with infants, oftentimes it'll be things like plants that they'll eat. Or they'll find medicine in mom's purse or something like that that isn't in a closed container and eat that. Kids will literally drink anything or eat anything. And if you can imagine some of the things that kids are poisoned on, they drink gasoline, they drink all the cleaning solutions under the sink. They don't have a discriminating taste for what they should and shouldn't be drinking. And so it always amazes me that kids will actually put that stuff in their mouth, and they don't just stop there, they actually drink it. So you really have to be careful about poisonings. Okay, so that was a good one. What else for a young baby? This is a kiddo who's crawling around, and usually by about, 5 to 7 months, they have a lot of speed. They can get around on the floor pretty well. Stairs, good. Very good. Have you seen those baby gates that people have in their houses? If they don't have those to block off stairs, then you're going to want to make sure you're around, because babies love to climb stairs and they fall down them really easily. The other thing that they do with stairs is for infants who are around 9 months, right before they're walking, some families will have those little walkers, you know, little things that they sit in and walk around. They can practice walking that way, but they also fall down the stairs really easily with those. So for walkers, either don't use them at all, or you have to constantly supervise kids anyway. The key to safety and preventing accidents with all age of kids is to watch them. The minute they're out of your sight, they're into something they shouldn't be. So being there all the time is really what you need to do. And if they're asleep, checking on them frequently too. Okay, what else about babies? We've got poisoning, we've got choking on small things, we've got, what was yours again? Stairs, thank you. Falls? Okay, good. So what does that mean for you when you're taking care of a young infant and you're trying to get them cleaned up? Watch them very closely. How many of you have tried to bathe a baby in a bathtub? Isn't that an interesting experience? Okay, the worst scenario to have happen with an infant or a young child of any age, and I mean don't leave any kid of any age in a bathtub by themselves, is they're in the bathtub by themselves and the phone rings and you go to answer it. What are you going to do? How would you problem solve that? Yeah. Wrap the baby in a towel and carry it to the phone, or bring, if it's a portable phone, you can bring that into the bathroom when you're doing the bath, or don't answer the phone. There really isn't a whole lot of choice. The point is you don't want to leave that infant or young child ever by themselves in a bathtub. Infants especially can drown in about this much water. And the same thing goes for those little outdoor wading pools. You know, it's summertime and sometimes people have those in their yards, or worse yet, swimming pools for toddlers who are getting around. You really have to be mindful. Ditches, if you're on Patty Creek, for example, you really have to be mindful of water. Okay, have we covered everything that you can think of for infants? Yep. Okay, that's about it. You guys did real well. Let's think of toddlers. Those are kids ages 2 and 3 usually. 1 to 2, 2 to 3. What would they get into that would be harmful to them? Garbage, right. And then what do they do with the garbage? Yeah, they would. I'm telling you, kids will eat anything. You guys probably all did that. How many parents have told you that they've had to call poison control because of something that you've eaten? Anybody? Let's talk about medicines and where to put medicines, okay? Anytime you've got a young child, and I mean by that less than 5, less than 6, usually by about 5 or 6 they have learned that medicines are not for them. Number one, you never call medicines candy. If you're giving babies Tylenol or kids Tylenol or medicines that their parents want you to give them before they go to bed, like cold medicines or something, don't ever call it candy. Sometimes they taste really good. Liquid Tylenol tastes like cherry, and most kids like that real well. Some of the antibiotics that might be kept in the refrigerator taste pretty good. So it's a mistake to call that candy. They need to know that it's medicine, and that they only get it when a grown-up gives it to them. Okay? Let's see. The other thing is, for that age, they get into purses. So you want to make sure, like if you're taking bags or backpacks or something like that, that you don't have some Tylenol or something like that that they can get into. Aspirin poisonings in young children are about as bad as they get. That's a very dangerous kind of poisoning for kids. And vitamins can be very dangerous. And you know, some of the chewable vitamins that you have now, the Flintstones and some of those, are pretty yummy. And again, if parents have called those medicine or this will make you strong, there have been lots of poisonings on vitamins because kids are trying to be strong and grow big. So again, that's a medicine. It should be called a medicine. Okay? What else can you think of for that 1 to 2-year-old or 2 to 3-year-old? Right, right. They're walking around pretty well. They're not necessarily running very well, but they like to do it. You know what I mean? They're running around and they still have this, you know, kind of uncoordinated little run about them. It's easy for them to fall and, you know, bonk their heads, fall onto sticks, something like that. Right, right. And you have your own liabilities too. So just, again, supervision and watching kids, young kids who are outdoors playing especially. Outside can be pretty dangerous. Okay, what else can you think of for that age group? Right. Very good. Right. What happens if you stick something in an electrical outlet like that over here? What would happen? You would get shocked, right. Now kids, notoriously 2-year-olds, 18-month-olds, something like that, they like to play with those, and they usually don't just stick your fingers in. It's pretty tough to get your finger shocked until you get it in, but what they do like to do is use something like forks, something metal, to stick in there to see what happens. That's how they're trying to figure out how that works. So it's a real normal thing for a kid that age to want to do, is to figure out what that thing does. So again, supervision. Many parents now have those plugs where you can't even get them out to get something plugged in. But those are a really good idea, and that's just something about preventing accidents with kids that age. So that's real good. If a child does get shocked, you're going to need to call 911. Okay, so that's one of those things that can be real harmful. Okay, anybody think of anything else? Again, water with this age is probably about one of the worst hazards. And what can you think of if you've got a kid who's 2 and they're outside playing and there's no fence in the yard, for example? What might they do? Right, right. Kids when they're 2 and 3 even when they're 4, they don't think. If a ball goes across the street, they won't think about what's coming. They'll just think they need to go get the ball. And if they haven't learned never to do that, or they forget, they may know that real well. We live on a river up in the Blackfoot, and I have a boy who's almost 5. And we've been up at this house for about a year and a half, and he has been religiously told time after time after time never to go to the water unless we're with him. And, you know, for the whole last summer we were fine. We're always outside with him anyway. But this one time this year we were burning some brush, and I was going by. I could see him playing, but I was behind some trees. And my daughter, who's older, came to get me to say that Colin had gone down by the river. And my heart was just in my toes. And I ran down there, and he had a little ninja turtle that had gotten dirty in the mud, and he went down to wash it. And he didn't have a clue that he was violating a safety rule. And it was one that was so strictly enforced all along. He's never been able to do that. He just forgot. And he's almost 5. So kids just do. They don't do it maliciously. They just forget. And they have to be reminded and watched. Okay, what else can you think of? How about cars? We've mentioned that a little bit. Just going across the street or getting into trouble that way without thinking. When kids are a little bit older, if you're watching older kids who are riding their bikes on the street, what do you need to worry about? Okay. For preschoolers, I don't think it's appropriate for a preschooler to be on their bike on the street anyway. A sidewalk in front of the house is probably, you know, okay for maybe a 5-year-old. But anything less than that, they're often gone and out in the street, and they just don't, they need to have somebody with them going around the block, or they need to not do it at all. So that's a real danger. Bikes. Who came in with helmets? Show me your helmets. A couple of you had those. Okay, good. Let's see that. How'd you get the scrape on your forehead? Skateboard. Did you have this on when you did that? Ah. Here we have a lesson. This is really good that you have this. Did you get this for a present after you did your head? No? You had it at home already? Okay. It's a common thing for young people your age and for even younger kids not to learn to ride their bikes with this or skateboard with these. And, you know, you really get injuries. Young kids, it's just like car seats with babies. If you learn to ride with a helmet or a skateboard with a helmet, then you'll use it. I still use a helmet on my bike. I don't skateboard anymore, but if I did, I would. And it's just something that it doesn't mean you're not a grown-up to not wear a helmet. And the head injury potential is really much higher. You know, you got a bit of a one right here. But serious head injuries are much greater without bike helmets. So I'm really glad to see you have this. How many of you rode your bikes down here without helmets today? Did anybody? Okay. All right. Do you have helmets at home? No? Okay. A lot of times young people will just forget them. They don't like to wear them. They don't like the way they look. But injuries look much worse. So with older kids, you know, young school-age kids, you might have to be concerned about bike things. And please have them put their helmets on. Whether or not their parents, that's a rule for their parents to have them use them or not. You can explain to them that that's my rule. If we're going to ride bikes, it's my rule. Just like seatbelts, if you're going to take a child in a car, you should absolutely have them use their seatbelt. Okay? Is anybody old enough to drive kids around yet? All right. How many of you guys wear seatbelts in your car? Oh, that's great. That's really good. So if we can get the group bike helmets, you'll be golden. That's really good. Any questions about accidents that I haven't thought of? And talks about what the hazards might be in there. For poisonings, the most common place to find hazards are under the sink. And we work with families all the time and daycare providers too. Just don't put things under there. Kids know where they are. They don't have any, even if they're in childproof caps, they just don't, they can get those off. In fact, they've studied this. 4-year-olds can get childproof caps off better than adults. Yeah. So, you know, it really was a nice effort. And for younger kids, it probably works pretty well. But for kids, when they hit about 4, they can usually get them off just fine. So this is something that you should really look at and take to heart. You also have 2 poison control handbooks. These are put out by the Poison Prevention Center in Montana. Actually, it's a toll-free number, and it's listed on the back here and inside on this one. This is something that should be in your babysitting kits, this number. Put this thing right in your babysitting kits that you're going to set up, along with the toys and the Play-Doh and the fun stuff. This is really a very important thing to have. Many parents have poison control stickers with this number on their phones. If they don't, they should. If you can't find it and haven't remembered this, if you're out in the park or something like that, 911 can help you get a hold of poison control. But if a kid takes asthma medicine or drinks some poison cleaning fluid, you don't want to call. 911 is an okay place to call, but the better place to call right off the bat would not be the parents, and it would not be the hospital emergency room, and it would not even be 911 necessarily. It would be poison control, because they'll talk you through what you need to do. Okay? It's important if kids get into things that you don't wait. Don't feel guilty about what's happened. It happens to a lot of people. Hopefully you can prevent all that stuff in the first place. But if you don't, and if they do get into something, don't hesitate to call and tell somebody what happened right away, okay? They will tell you whether or not the poison they've taken would respond to this. And I'm going to pass this around. I need this back. This is called syrup of ipecac. And it's medicine that kids are given only when poison control instructs you to give it. Don't ever give it on your own. Most households have some of this now for young kids. If they don't, you're going to need to do something different, and poison control would tell you what to do. What this is medicine that's given to a child who's taken something poisonous, and it will make them throw it back up. Okay? And the poison control people can tell you, number one, whether or not, depending on what they've taken, you should give it, and number two is how to give it, and then what to do next. Okay? So poison control in a poisoning is the first place to call. Unless the child's already unconscious or something like that, then you'd want to call 911. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Does anybody have any questions about poisoning? Some things that kids get into, like gasoline, for example, it's not appropriate to give this medicine. So if you call poison control and you say they've swallowed gasoline, or the powdered dishwasher soap has lye in it. And the reason why you don't give this stuff and have them throw that back up is because it's already caused burns on the way down, and it will cause burns again on the way up. And those can be real problematic for kids later. So they'll tell you to do something different with those kinds of things. And that's why you always call first and just don't automatically give that. If you get things splashed in the eyes of kids, like chemicals, on the back of this one it shows you how to deal with that. Basically, the most common thing when you're babysitting is probably sand from a sandbox. And that's why kids should never be allowed to throw sand at one another. That's just a preventive thing, because it's really difficult to get sand out of the eyes. If you do, or another kind of chemical that can cause burns or damage to the eye, what you want to do is you want to take the child, and now if you've got a young kid, they're going to be screaming bloody murder when you do this. But what you want to do is you want to put them under the sink, or near the sink, with their head over like this, and wash their eye out. The best thing to do is you want to use warm water, not hot, not cold, something lukewarm, and you want to put it in a small cup and wash it from the nose out, so anything can be rinsed out away from the face rather than into the other eye if you do it this way. Can you see that? So you want to wash from the nose out. Thank you. All right. And again, sand will be the thing that is probably the most common for you all. It's important to discourage kids who have sand in their eyes from rubbing it. Why? Who would know that? Mm-hmm. Okay, it scrapes the eyeball itself and can cause abrasions, it's called, and then they have to go and have their eyes patched and all that. So getting them in the house quickly and washing their eyes out. You probably have to do that for a good 5 minutes. And again, you will not have a baby be pleased with that, but it's important that you get it out. And if you can't get it out, then you're going to have to call for help. Okay? Any questions about that? There's a list in here of poisonous plants, and what's kind of fun is to, especially if you have younger brothers and sisters, is go home and see what plants you have in your house that probably shouldn't be there if you have young kids in your house. Check out your own house with this. The most common one that people worry about are mountain ash berries. Kids get into those out in the yard sometimes. Do you know which trees those are with the bright orange berries on them? Those, I think you have to take an incredible amount to get sick from those. Poinsettias are also a common concern at Christmas time, and poison control gets a lot of calls about poinsettias, and those usually aren't too harmful either. Rhododendrons are, the bulbs of tulips are. And again, kids who are digging around will eat anything. Mushrooms in the yard are poisonous. So those are some of the common ones. Plus, just some house plants, and you might look and see what you've got at your place. Okay, any questions about safety things or preventing accidents that you want to know? We haven't. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So what do you do with that in a trailer court? It's just like you would do with that in any setting. Trailer courts are particularly a problem for traffic, so I understand what you're saying, but regardless of where a 3-year-old lives, they won't have enough sense to remember that you've told them that 5 times before that. They just forget. So what you're going to have to do is just be with that child all the time. And each time you purposefully take him across the street, take that opportunity to remind him how you do this. This is how we do, because that's about the age when you could start working with kids and really get them to understand, that cars are coming and that cars can be hurtful, and this is what you need to do. You need to look this way and wait until a car goes by, or how to cross with green lights or something like that. So teaching them is a good thing to do also, but you can't count on that being remembered, because they probably won't. Okay, so you're just going to have to watch that little guy like a hawk. Okay. Anything else? Okay, you guys really knew a lot about all that. Who has changed a diaper before? Okay, let's see. I see a bright yellow t-shirt back there with her hand up. Do you want to come up and change this? Show us how to do that? Poor Minnie. There you go. Have you worked with plastic diapers mostly? Do any of you work with cloth diapers? Okay. That's good, by the way. I like to see that. They're a little different, aren't they? Great. Look at that. No leaks in the legs or anything. That was great. The important thing, this isn't difficult with these, with the cloth diapers that you have to fold from squares. You're going to have the parents show you how to do that. They're all a little different. Some of them are kind of rectangular shaped, and you do those differently. But I think many people still use plastic, and the trick with these is to get these tapes around in the front so the legs are fairly snug. Now, you don't want them tight so the kid's legs turn blue, and that happens. So you don't want them that tight, but you do want them tight enough so the stuff stays in there when they go, okay? When you're cleaning babies, the thing to do is you want to wipe from front to back, especially with little girls. So if they've wet and they've had a bowel movement also, you want to clean up the front first with your wipes and then clean up the back. Okay, because it's easy to give young girls infections by doing it the other way. So you don't want to just rub everything all at the same time. Clean up the front and in between the fold parts, and then clean up the back. Okay? With boys, it's a little less important that you do that. Does that get embarrassing? No. I want to spend some time, when you take diapers off, you need to be pretty mindful of where you put them. You don't want to put them on the kitchen counter. You don't want to put them on the couch. In fact, you shouldn't be changing kids on the couch or on the floor or any place like that. A table, a changing table where that's supposed to be done, most families have. Or a pad if you're going to put them on the floor or on a couch of any kind of pad that you can wipe off afterwards. Or some newspaper if you don't have that. Or a garbage bag if you don't have that. Something should be under the baby's bottom besides just the diaper that you're changing. Because you can get germs onto the couch, and then the babies will be wandering around and they'll get sick that way. So watching where you put diapers, it's probably a good idea to have them in a plastic-lined garbage can too. And again, that'll depend on the kind of place that you're in. And the most important thing after you change diapers is to what? What do you do after you change a diaper? Throw it away. And then what do you do? Yeah, who said that? All right. You have some hand washing handouts too. Of all the things that you can do for kids to keep them healthy when you're babysitting, it's to wash your hands well and to help them wash their hands when they should. Now tell me the times when you and the kid, however old they are, should be washing their hands. Before they eat. Right. When else? When they eat or when you're fixing something for them to eat, right? Okay, when else can you think of? When they're done eating, they usually need another round. Yeah, that's less for germs than for just being messed up, but they usually get pretty messy. Did you have your hand up? Okay, after kids go to the bathroom or after you go to the bathroom. Always remember to wash your hands. Okay, when's another time? For babies. Do babies need to wash their hands? Go ahead, you had a comment. When they come inside from playing, especially in things like sandboxes and dirt. I mean, kids love to do that. Dig in the dirt and play in sandboxes. You can pick up a lot of bacteria and parasites and a bunch of awful things that way. Also, playing in the creeks or rivers around here, again, with you right there, or the swimming pools. Water breeds something called giardia. If you've probably heard of that. It's the thing that campers get diarrhea from. So any of the ditches or creeks that kids might be swimming in or wading in, or even pools, can be a problem for that. So after they've even been in the water, it's a good idea to wash their hands. When else? Do you wash a baby's hands? Would you need to wash a baby's hands? How many think yes? Okay, how many think no? Maybe some aren't sure. Okay, babies, when you take their diapers off, again, you have to think about how they learn things. They learn things with their hands. And a lot of times they'll be learning about their bodies at the same time. So what they do automatically, young babies, and you've seen this, you take their diapers off to change them and they touch themselves. And they can get germs on their hands that way. So after diaper changing the baby, you wash your hands certainly, but you also need to wash theirs. Okay? When you wash your hands, there's some things to remember. You always have to use soap. Just water doesn't get rid of the germs. And those little wipe things with alcohol on them, you know, the baby wipes that you change diapers with, those get skin looking clean, but the germs are still there. So those don't work to wash your hands either. So you have to use soap and running water, and preferably warm running water. With kids, though, you're going to have to be really mindful of them going in and washing their hands themselves, especially if their family has a hot water tank that's set pretty high, because kids can get burned. Same thing that happens in the bathtub. So young kids primarily need help washing their hands, and that means you're going to have to go into the bathroom with them. Don't send that 2-year-old into the bathroom and tell him to wash his hands. Number one, he can't do it well, and number two, he might get burned. Okay? So regulating that water, my 7-year-old still, you know, gets it too hot sometimes. At a restaurant anyway, we have our hot water tank set down at home. Any questions about hand washing? Okay. If you're taking care of a bunch of kids, it's probably better to use paper towels than all have them use the same towel to dry their hands. Because the germs that were on their hands that could be wiped off on the towel, they'll all get them on the towel and then they'll get their hands dirty again. Okay? And liquid soap is probably better for the same reason than a bar of soap that a lot of people use. Wet soap breeds a lot of germs in itself. It's always interesting to try to figure out what an infant under age 1 will eat and what's appropriate for them. I want to caution you about some foods that you'll see used for young babies that just are totally inappropriate. Does anybody know what those might be? What would you never give a young child, an infant? Babies eat solids. It's fixed differently. But sometimes, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that for like a 2-week-old or a 3-week-old. You're right. Okay. Okay, hard meat. Why not? Okay, they don't have enough teeth and they don't know how to chew something like that. So their meat is all mashed up, isn't it? It's either mashed, if you think of a 9-month-old or a 12-month-old, if they're getting meat, they're getting mashed up meat or the baby food kind of pureed, mixed up in a blender or in a baby food jar. That's the kind of meat that they get. What else can you think of that's just a big no-no for babies? Good. Very good. I'm glad you mentioned that because it's pretty fun for young kids to watch movies with you all and have you fix popcorn for them. Popcorn is a common cause of emergency room admissions for choking. So kids under 3 should not get popcorn, in my opinion. You're going to see a lot of that varied in practice, but nuts, good. Again, kids under 3 should not eat nuts, especially peanuts. Small what? Hard candy, very good. I've seen 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds choke on hard candy. I think it's a real bad choice for kids in general. So softer candy is much better. Those round balls of hard candy are very dangerous for even kids up to 6 or 7.
I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I heard that kids under 1 shouldn't have honey.
Right. Do you know why? Okay. It's not for choking. We're talking mostly about things that they could choke on. But honey is a real good way for a certain germ to grow called that causes botulism, if you've heard of that. It's the same germ that grows in canned foods that aren't well canned or that are dented. That's why you don't buy dented cans at the store. So that's why honey and babies, it's a problem for botulism. Olives, good. Okay. Infants should not eat olives. What else? Some of the cereals are usually pretty good. The flaky ones, how old was that child? 5. Okay. Most cereal, if you put milk on it, softens up pretty well. But there are a few that will still have problems. Most kids at that age choke because they're either goofing around when they're eating or they're shoving too much food in their mouth at once. Is that what happened with? Right. Right. So eating and laughing is not a good idea, and you really need to discourage kids from doing that when they're eating. Giggling and bouncing around, and it's really a dangerous thing to do. We've forgotten one other thing that babies shouldn't get that's pretty important. Something round, green or purple. Yeah, right. Okay, so let's name those again. No nuts, especially peanuts. No grapes. Hot dogs are another one I didn't mention. A lot of kids, young kids, eat hot dogs. If you're going to give kids hot dogs, the best way to do it is not cut it into little round pieces like this, because you can imagine that slides down their throat pretty easily. Cut it into lengths and let them chew on it that way. Okay? Do you see what I mean? You don't want to cut round pieces like you would carrots. Cut them lengthwise. Carrots are the same thing. So no grapes, no nuts, no seeds, things like sunflower seeds. And hot dogs are probably a bad idea too. And definitely no hard candy. Okay? So if you can remember all that stuff, now let's look at some of the things that they can eat. Okay? I imagine most parents, if you're caring for infants, would have thought about this already, and they will have something ready for you to give the babies. But if not, these are some of the kinds of things that you might see young kids eating. It's common for kids when they're born and up through about 6 months not to have anything anymore but formula or breast milk. So it's not uncommon for a 4-month-old not to be getting anything else, and that's plenty of nutrition for them just from the milk they get. At about 4 months or 6 months, many times earlier, depending on what the parents choose to do, you'll see babies start on solid foods. So it's the younger infants that won't have solids, but around 4 to 6 months they probably will be starting to do that. And what they usually start in is some of the baby cereals. You've seen the little rice cereals that you mix up with the formula and spoon it in. It's real fun to feed infants who haven't been fed a lot before. It's real interesting to watch their faces when they start tasting food. After that, they usually eat vegetables that are blended up or in a baby food jar, and some fruit that's fixed the same way. At about 6 months, they usually start getting some teeth. So that's why their food is all mashed before that or are blended up and almost a liquid. It's because they don't have any teeth to eat it with. Once they start getting teeth at around 6 months, then they'll start being able to chew things like Cheerios or chew on a cracker, little piece of toast, finger foods, cheese maybe. Okay. Yogurt is something that's commonly given to pretty young infants even, unless they have a problem with milk, because there's milk in yogurt. Okay. And then as they get up to be about 9 months old, 9 to a year, they're pretty much able to feed themselves pretty well. They don't use a spoon or a fork yet, but they will feed themselves with their hands. And again, washing their hands so they can do that without getting a lot of germs is a good idea. But finding something for babies about that age that they can feed themselves with is really the way to go, because they eat a lot better that way than you spooning it in. A lot of 10-month-olds say get pretty indignant if you try to feed them anymore. They like to do it themselves. You know, they're big enough now. So putting something on the tray or on a plate that they can feed themselves is a good idea. Macaroni, you know, those kind of things. Any questions about food? That's kind of a brief overview. Toddlers and preschoolers can be pretty picky about what they eat. It's probably best to avoid a lot of food battles because there's about 3 things you can't get a young child to do. Eat what you want them to, go to sleep when you want them to, and go to the bathroom when you want them to. So in some ways there's not a lot of point in being real persistent. You can be creative and suggestive and offer them the options to do that, but you flat out can't make them eat when they don't want to. So making fun foods is real fun for toddlers. Take a piece of celery, for example, put some peanut butter in it, and make an insect design with some raisins on the outside or some little antenna. That's kind of fun to do with young kids. So there's some real creative ways that you can get picky toddlers to eat good food. Okay? Does anybody else have any tricks like that that have worked for them? No? Okay, any questions about this? The last few minutes that we have, just want to point out this purple handout. It's something that we put together at Child Care Resources to let parents know and babysitters know when it's not a good idea to be taking care of them in their regular daycare. It probably would be a good idea for you not to be responsible for some of the things that are listed here either. If kids are sick enough to have something on this list, you will need to know quite a bit more than maybe you're prepared to know. So especially fevers in young kids and vomiting and diarrhea. So look at these for a second. And I'm going to close with things like, and a lot of these things are, some of these things are contagious too, like pink eye and impetigo. So again, if you're caring for a child with that problem, you know, your chance of getting it yourself without real meticulous hand washing is pretty high. So I would suggest that you don't make a practice of taking care of young kids when they're sick, at your age anyway. Okay, and we don't even suggest that daycare providers do this. There's a handout, what color, is that white? Okay. White, it's called How to Take a Temperature. And I've got some thermometers that are set at various temperature levels, and I'm going to work with you for the time that we have left on how to read the darn things, because they're really hard to read sometimes. The one thing I want to tell you about taking temperatures, I want to tell you two things. Young babies don't get fevers like older infants and young kids will do. And I'm talking about a 1-month-old, a 2-month-old, even a 3-month-old. What they do when they're sick is they get temperatures that are low. So if you have a baby of that age with a temperature of 101, which is high, elevated, because 98.6 is normal, they're going to be pretty sick. You see what I'm saying? So usually when kids get, young infants get viruses, for example, they'll drop their temperatures below 98.6, and they'll be 97 or something like that. Now that can mean two things. It can mean that they're cold, because babies who are young don't necessarily keep their temperatures up like they should either. But it can also mean that they're sick. So with an infant, I would discourage you, or with anybody while you're doing your work, I would discourage you from doing rectal temperatures. Just forget that. There's some harm you can do in trying to do that, especially with young, wiggly kids. The better way to do it is stick it under the arm. Okay, so that's what I want you to do. I'm also going to show you how to do that, and then we're going to try to read these temperatures, okay? So for kids who are older than 4, you can take one of these long-ended thermometers. This is an oral thermometer, the ones with the long end, and stick it under the tongue. We all know how to do that, right? Okay. Stick it under the tongue. For kids who are less than 4, the best place to do is stick it in the armpit and have them close their arm down. So I want somebody to come up. Can you come up and help me? Okay. Okay, what we're going to do is he's, how old are you?
11.
Okay, how old are you? Pretend and we're going to take your temperature. How old do you want to be?
5.
5? You can put it in your mouth if you're 5.
Okay.
Okay. Under 4, how old do you want to be?
Under 4, 3.
Okay. We got a 3-year-old boy and we think he's sick. Now, this does not tell you anything. When I work in clinic, I've done this, where parents will tell me, oh, his temperature felt like it was 100 and 100. It was just, you know, a real low one. And you take it, and it does feel pretty low. It's 104. So this tells you nothing. Don't even bother trying to guess that way. Okay, what you do is you take any kind of thermometer. It can be, when it's under the arm, it can be either the long-nosed one or the one with the short nose. Okay, this is a rectal thermometer. You never want to put this in the mouth. You never want to put this in the bottom. Okay? You see the difference? The long one goes in the mouth or under the arm. The short one goes under the arm or in the bottom. Okay? So what you do is you lift the arm up, and with the shirt you want to slide that down, get it right in the armpit, and hold this arm down. Okay? And how long do you think you have to wait? 3 minutes? In the mouth it's 3 minutes. Under the arm it's 5. Now, with young kids, it's hard to get them to hold still with their arm down like that. You can read them a book or something to distract them. Have them watch a movie while you're taking their temperature. But if they don't feel good, odds are they won't want to sit still that long. So just do the best you can and try to get a temperature in a shorter time. It probably won't change that much as it goes up. So 5 minutes later, you lift up and see 99.8. Now, the booklet you have here tells you how to correct for a temperature under the arm. You don't need to worry about that. Just forget that whole thing. The temperature you get under the arm is pretty much the same in a young kid as you would get any other way. So it tells you more than you knew before, and you don't have to correct for that. Okay? Thank you. So, this one I want to pass around. This is a normal temperature. 98.6, which means 98.6 degrees is normal. So I want to pass that one around first so you can try to read that. What you have to do is rotate the thermometer back and forth in the light until you see the silver mark, and then read the numbers. And then I'm going to finish, and I guess we take a break. I'm going to finish and make sure you all have a chance. I'll go back with you. I'll make sure you all have a chance to look at a thermometer and at least get a reading on one, okay? So let's see. Would you work with these guys on this one? We'll work together on this one, see what you read.
I both manage Aero Ambulance here in Missoula, and I also work on the ambulance. Our business, which is obvious, is emergency response. To somewhat give you the overall picture of what happens from the time that there is an emergency that you're at to what happens in the end, I need to discuss what happens down at 911. So to start with, while I'm talking, how about if I go ahead and just pass those, take one and pass them along. Can I do that? Yeah, that'd be the thing. Modern technology. So let me pass a few more of these around. These are emergency phone numbers which you can put on the wall by the phone or in the front of the phone book or someplace where you can find them so when you're at home, and also hopefully whoever you're babysitting for, if you're in somebody else's house, will have these. We've put quite a few of these out in the community, so hopefully there's more. Go ahead and just pass them around. Hopefully there's more and more of them out there all the time. This here also is a babysitter instruction sheet. What this is for is for the people you're babysitting for, not necessarily for you. It'll be for you if there's an emergency and you need to take information off here, but this is for the parents of whoever you're babysitting for. So go ahead and take one of these and pass along. You can make copies of those, Xerox copies of those, and have 3 or 4 of them with you, so depending on who you babysit, you can come and bring them a Xerox copy and they can fill it out and keep it also right by their phone. So the first thing is allow me to discuss 911 with you. If you're babysitting at somebody's house and there's an emergency, for instance, if the child you're babysitting for falls down and bumps his or her head and seems to be unconscious or unresponsive or is bleeding and crying, and with the first aid that you know and what you've learned, you can't take care of the situation, then what you need to do, thanks partner, what you need to do is go to the telephone and call 911, or have somebody that's with you go to the telephone and call 911, and don't leave the person alone. Do the first aid that you know, call 911. Now when you dial those 3 magic numbers, you're going to get an operator at the other end. The people at 911 are very nice. They're like you and I. They've all got names, and they don't sound like operators. They don't sound like the AT&T operator that you get. They're just nice people. They're Surrey and Scott and Robin and Carol and Cheryl and Jane. They're just real nice people down there, anxious to help with whatever problem you may have. And what they'll ask, first of all, is they'll say, is this an emergency? And you tell them, yes, it is. That's precisely why you're calling. And they will ask the nature of the emergency. And you can tell them that I'm babysitting for a 4-year-old child. He tripped on the sidewalk, fell, hit his head, and he's bleeding. They will then tell you to stay on the line so that if something happens with that phone still off the hook, they can punch into the computer where your phone call is coming from. The way it works is they've got a computer system that if you call 911 and hang up, they can trace that phone call back to you in case there is some kind of an emergency, and they will send a policeman over to see if there's an emergency. The reason why they ask you to stay on the line is so not only can they continue to trace that phone call, but they can find the address and they can also get more information from you. So when you call them, stay on the line. So you've established it's an emergency, they've asked you to stay on the line, and they will ask what the address is. It's very important, of paramount importance, that you know what the address is that you're babysitting at, whether it's east or west, north or south, and what the numbers are on the house. It's also very helpful when you're babysitting at places. If you look at the outside of the house and remember if it's a tan house or a green house, if the numbers are displayed prominently on the house or on the mailbox, if it happens to be a house in an alley, down the block, around the corner, behind the trees, sometimes places are rather difficult to find just by the address. So it's important to know the address. It's also very important to know the phone number. And they will ask you that, and they will ask you to continue to stay on the line. They will ask you what the nature of the call is, and you tell them again, the 4-year-old child has fallen and hit his head, and he's bleeding. And they will ask you, is he breathing, which is very important. If he is not breathing, then they will give you instructions to do rescue breathing or artificial ventilations on the person. They will also ask if he has got a pulse, and hopefully you've had enough first aid to know, check the carotid artery or a brachial artery or a radial pulse. This is really the easiest to check to see if there's a pulse. As far as the arteries go, arteries carry good blood, good oxygenated blood to the system. So when you breathe in a big breath of air, the oxygen in the lungs gets transferred to the arteries, to the blood, and is pumped to the organs. On either side of your neck here, on either side of the Adam's apple, right down in there. If you push kind of hard, don't press on both sides at once. We don't want you passing out, but press on one side or the other. You should be able to feel your pulse there. That's your carotid artery, and you should be able to feel your pulse, your heartbeat in there, so that you know you've got a good heartbeat. So you check to see if the child is breathing. If he's screaming, you know he's breathing. And if he's screaming, you know he's got a good pulse because he's excited. You don't ever breathe without having your heart beating, and you don't ever scream without breathing. So if he's screaming, you got it made, at least at that point. If not, if he's unconscious, it's very important to check to see if he's breathing. The way to do that is to look, listen, and feel. What you do is, can I borrow you for a moment? Just go ahead and just sit up. Yeah, sit up right there. Okay, and lay back. Yeah, there you go. To look, listen, and feel to see if someone is breathing is you look at the chest to see if the chest is moving. You listen. Yeah, I can hear that there is air coming out of her lungs, and I could also feel it on my face. So I'm right down here. I look, I listen, and I can feel on my face that she's breathing. And though it's a time when you're very excited and very scared, take 10 or 15 seconds and do that. That 10 or 15 seconds is going to be very important now. So take the time now to look, listen, and feel, and then right in here at the neck, feel for the pulse. 911 will ask you, is the patient breathing? Is this child breathing? Okay, go ahead. Thanks a bunch. Is the child breathing? Well, yes, he's screaming, or no, he's not. They will tell you how to rescue breathe. They'll ask for a pulse. If he is breathing, but he's unresponsive or seems to have passed out or seems to have been knocked out, it's important to keep his airway open. Don't let a person, anybody who has been knocked unconscious or is unresponsive, be in any kind of an odd, weird position where they can't get air. You know, it's kind of difficult to breathe if you're like this. So try and keep that airway open. Keep him breathing. So let's say our child is breathing okay. If they're not, they will tell you how to ventilate this child. Our child has a pulse, so we're doing okay. He's screaming. They're going to say, okay, the problem is he fell on the sidewalk and he hit his head, and now he's bleeding. And it may look like a lot of blood. Don't let blood scare you. Blood is the fluid that transfers oxygen and nutrition in the body, and not much different than water in the big picture. And so don't let blood scare you when you see it, because head injuries and cuts in the head is very vascular, has a lot of veins and arteries, and bleeds quite a bit. As do other parts of the body, depending on what veins and such you might cut or scrape. They're going to ask you how much is the bleeding, how big is the cut or the laceration or the scrape, and they're going to ask you then to put pressure on it. Whenever you have a cut of any sort, whether it's on you, your parents, an animal, if your dog goes through a barbed wire fence and cuts himself, see if the mnemonic is ICE. It's a way to remember ICE, 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 compression, elevation, ICE. Ice, if you've got ice close, sometimes you don't. If you've got ice close, it causes the blood not to come to the area, so you don't bleed as fast. Compression is just pressure. If I'm bleeding here, or if I'm the 4-year-old that fell on the sidewalk and I'm bleeding, good firm, not too firm, but good firm pressure to stop the bleeding, and you'll see that some of the bleeding is stopping. And obviously elevation, cuts and lacerations, abrasions, or scrapes should be kept above the heart. If you scrape your knee up real bad and it's bleeding quite a bit, ice, compression, and lay down and keep it above your heart the heart has to work harder to try and pump blood uphill away from itself. And so that's what you should do for cuts or our 4-year-old that has landed on his head. So they will tell you to put compression on it, and by doing that, you'll stop the bleeding. Now, this whole thing that I've taken a number of minutes to cover is going to happen on the telephone probably in the matter of 60 seconds to 90 seconds. Hello, this is 911. Do you have an emergency? Yes, I do. I'm babysitting, and the 4-year-old fell down on the sidewalk, and he hit his head. They'll say, stay on the line. Is he responsive? Will he talk to you? Yes, he's screaming. Okay, well, the airway's fine then. Is he bleeding? Yes, he's bleeding a lot from his head. Okay, how big of an area is he bleeding from? And go put pressure on it and try and stay on the line, or have somebody else put pressure on it, or try and bring him to the phone where you can keep pressure on it and talk to us. Okay, so you got pressure on it. Now what they do is they push 2 buttons on this console. 911, by the way, is in the basement of the courthouse down here off of Broadway, and they've got, I believe now, 6 large consoles where they can dispatch or call the ambulance, city fire, rural fire, sheriff, and city police, Life Flight, and a whole number of other agencies, Sealy Ambulance, Arlee Ambulance, Frenchtown Fire, so they can call anybody or everybody at a push of a button. With your case right now, they'll push 2 buttons. Those 2 buttons will be, depending on whether you're located in rural fire district or city fire district, they'll push the button for fire, and they'll push the button for ambulance. And what that does is that signals tones that we hear on the radio. And the tones, you may have heard the tones when you've watched Rescue 911. The paramedics or firemen will be sitting around, and then you'll hear the loud tones go off, the musical notes go off, and the firemen or paramedics will jump up and get on the rigs, and off they'll go. Well, each agency has different tones, and the fire department responds, first of all, by the nature of their business. There are many more fire stations and fire departments than there are ambulances in town. So the fire departments respond because they can generally get there first. There's only 1 ambulance company in town, and we have 5 ambulances, and we generally stay kind of centrally located in the community to answer calls. But if there's a call up the Rattlesnake, we have Station 3 up there, Rural Station 3. If it's a call in Lolo, Rural Station 5. A call in Piltsville, Rural Station 4. A call down on West Broadway, City Station 1, or a call up on the South Hills, City Station 3. So they're located in such a way that they can respond rapidly while the ambulance is coming from the center of town to get to the appropriate location. So let's say that you're just across the street from the library here. Child's fallen down, you've got pressure on his head, 911 has pushed the 2 buttons, and they will announce over the radio, they will say, City Fire Engine 1 and Medic 1, which is the ambulance, our ambulance, Medic 1 respond to the, is this the 300 block? The 300 block of Maine. I better know these streets. I have to go rescue people on these streets. Respond to the 300 block of Maine, West Maine, for a 4-year-old child that has fallen down, bleeding from the scalp or bleeding from the head. The fire department will leave Station 1 right up here across from the courthouse and come Code 3 with lights and sirens down the quickest access, obeying the one-ways, down the quickest access. An Aero Ambulance Medic 1, 2 of our guys, our paramedics, will come from probably the center of town, right around the Burlington area, right about Mountain and Russell. That's about the center of town by Ole's Country Store there. And we'll converge on the scene. We'll get to the scene. City Fire will probably get there a little bit sooner than the ambulance because the ambulance has more traffic and such to get through, since City Fire is just up the block and over. At that point, a fireman will come up and ask you what happened. You will still be on the line with 911. During this time, the response time of city fire should be about 45 seconds to a minute, and the response to this area from the ambulance is going to be closer to 2 minutes to 2.5 minutes. So you're still on the line to 911. You're putting pressure on the child's head. And if you can't do both, tell the girl, or whether it's Scott, one of the guys, or one of the girls down there, tell them that I've got to put pressure on this. You want me to put pressure on to stop the bleeding? I want to hold him. He's crying. And they'll say, okay, well, leave the phone off the hook and check back with me every few minutes. So keep the pressure on. The firemen will show up. If there's any changes in the child's behavior, if he just all of a sudden stops crying or goes limp, or his eyes roll back, or really starts to shriek as if something worse has just happened while you're putting pressure on, let 911 know so they can update the fire department and the ambulance, because it really helps us to know what we're coming into. There's certain boxes we use for pediatric or children cases, and certain boxes we use for chest pain and possible heart attacks, and certain jump kits, we call them, boxes we use for automobile injuries, and we have them all on the ambulance, but it helps when you're jumping out of the ambulance, going down the sidewalk into the house, to know which box to have. So the firemen will get there. They will come up. They will say, what happened? What have we got? They'll try and comfort the child. They will take over and keep pressure on the child. They will then put oxygen on the child, help him breathe a little bit. They'll make sure he's still got a good airway, make sure he still has a good pulse, try and comfort him to get him to stop crying. They will stabilize any fractures. If it appears that when he fell, he also might have broken arm or any neck injury, they will stabilize that, and one of the firemen will sit and talk to you, because rightfully so, in that situation, you might be a little frazzled, you might be a little scared, and that's fine. That's normal behavior. I would be scared in that situation. And I am when I have to call 911 and I have to take care of someone, whether it's my child or whoever, until professional help gets there. It might be a little shaky. And so a fireman will take you aside and talk to you, ask what happened, and see what they can do to help you. Behind the scenes this whole time, people at 911, the fire department, and the ambulance are knowing that we're coming to a 4-year-old. We're wondering if a parent is around. If a parent isn't, where can a parent be reached? Not only do we need some consent from a parent to treat the child, unless it's an emergency, and in an emergency there's what's called implied consent. Don't be concerned with that. If a child is hurt and you call 911, you've done the right thing. But we need to be concerned about where the parent is and notifying them that if their child is injured and the child does need to go to the hospital, that we need to notify a parent. So it's real important when you're babysitting, if you know what store the parents just ran off to, if they just ran down to Safeway or over to Albertsons. It's important to know if they've gone out to the fairgrounds, if they're there for a cattle auction, or if they're there on the other side for a race car show or whatever like that. So parents can be tracked down, not necessarily by us, but by the hospital when the child gets there. Because parents like to know when their kids are hurt, when their kids are in the hospital. And so back to our scene, the fireman has you aside, talking to you, calming you down if you're upset, taking care of your needs. 2 other firemen will be taking care of the child. The ambulance will arrive. 1 or 2 paramedics, we run both nurses and paramedics, will come in, and they again will talk to the fireman. They very well may talk to you. They will establish that the child has a good airway, is breathing fine, what the wound is. By this time, the firemen are probably putting gauze on it and wrapping it up, making sure it doesn't bleed anymore. We'll establish if the child needs to go to the hospital to be checked. Something like this, the child probably does. Hitting your head like that, there's fear of concussion and other things going on inside with the brain. We'll gently carry the child to a stretcher or a cot, put him in the ambulance, and go to the hospital. That's what we do at our end. What you do at that point is, while we are transporting, if you can get a hold of the parent, or if you can, again, talk to the girl at 911 to give the phone number or address of where the child's parent is, if they're at a dinner party, or if they're at the fairgrounds, or if they just went to the store, 911 will ask you those kind of questions. And then after that, sit back and relax a little bit. Grab a Coke and sit down and relax, because by that time you might be a little shaky. It's a scary situation. So things that are very important for you to know is the address you're at, how to get to that address you're at, what the phone number is there, what the house looks like. It's also important to know some emergency information, which has to do with what's on the back of this. There's a consent form for treatment of children, and there's also some medical history insofar as what the child may be allergic to or other problems the child may have that the emergency room is going to have to know while they're treating the child, so they don't do anything more to harm the child. For instance, if the child is allergic to Tylenol and they want to give the child some Tylenol to help with the swelling, well, if the child's allergic to it, then that would be detrimental to the child's health. So a little history on the child would be important. If there's no other children in the house that you're watching, or no other responsibilities that you have at the house, the babysitter could ride to the hospital if you wanted to. What we would do is we'd put you in the front seat of the ambulance. You couldn't be in the back. Only in the back are the people providing primary care. But you could sit up in the front seat and talk to the ambulance driver and go to the hospital and be in the waiting room. The doctor may come out and ask you again what happened. If there is an incident or an emergency situation that happens, be prepared to tell the story many, many times over. Someone across the street that saw what happened is probably going to come over and ask what happened, or people that happen to be standing around looking will ask what happened. 911 is going to ask you what happened so they can notify the fire department accurately. The firemen are going to ask you exactly what happened so they got the story straight. The ambulance is going to come in and we're going to ask you what happened to make sure that we got the whole story straight. And then if you do go to the hospital, a nurse or physician, doctor, may ask you exactly what happened. The other variable in this, a police officer may also show up. Generally on car accidents, which you wouldn't be involved in as a babysitter, but in car accidents, policemen always show up because there's possible some illegal act that took place, a person running a stop sign and hitting somebody else, or someone going too fast and hitting something. So the policeman is there for traffic control and to try and get to the bottom of what happened. Sometimes with calls when babysitters call in or when children are involved, the policemen also go to the scenes to lend a little extra support. With infants and children, you can usually never have enough hands. So a policeman may also show up. Don't be afraid. You've done nothing wrong. You've in fact taken the responsibility to call 911 when you saw an emergency. And a lot of people are going to come with lights and sirens, but that is what the situation warrants, what the situation needs. For bad burns, you need to call 911. You need to get emergency help right there. 911 is the people to call. Going next door and talking to the neighbor to see if they can drive you and the child to the hospital generally isn't a very good idea. If the child needs emergency care or needs an ambulance can be there quicker, and then there's no legal problems with a neighbor taking a person in who's hurt and possibly having that child get worse on the way to the hospital without the medical care that's necessary. In the case of a burn or a cut with pulling a knife off the counter, call 911, tell them what happened. Of course, with the knife, you're going to want to use the ICE, ice, compression, elevation, keep it up above the heart. For a burn, 911 will tell you, and it's basic first aid, to run cold water over the burn. That's about all you can do. Back when I was young, they used to put butter on burns and things like that. I don't know if people still talk about that, but that's bad. That's not a good thing to do. If anything, if you take some kind of butter or oil or what we would call an occlusive dressing, what it's going to do is it's going to keep the heat in and it's going to continue to burn. So cold water cools the area and helps the skin, and at first makes the burn actually feel a little worse, and then it'll start making it feel better. You're probably going to have to hold the child down. If a child pulls a boiling pot off the stove and burns an arm, you're going to need some help to hold that child down to put cold water on that. But he's going to be screaming anyway from the initial burn. Go ahead. Aloe is wonderful, but not at an emergency or primary care incident. When I had a bad sunburn a couple years ago on my shoulders, I didn't go to the hospital. It was actually a burn that was bad enough I could have gone to the hospital and they would have given me some medicine for it, but I chose not to because I knew what to do. I kept moist cloths on it, and then when it started to blister up, I put some aloe gel on it, and it heals. I don't know what all the scientific research on aloe plants and various things are, but it seems to work. It seems to work for me. But it's not medically accepted in a primary care or emergency situation. And what's going to happen is if a person has a burn, someone puts aloe on it, it may not only keep some of the heat in, but it's going to get kind of gunky. And when the doctor takes a look at the burn, he has to see how extensive it is, and they're going to have to wash that out, which is going to cause even more pain than the initial burn. So anything that goes on a burn other than cold water is going to have to be washed out, and it hurts. It hurts bad. So for burns, cold water, 911, and tell them what you have. So that's kind of the 911 system. I'll tell you briefly what we do. We respond. Our tones go off. We hear that the fire department or the life flight, or depending on how far out it is also responding. And we respond. We call 911 and tell them that we're 10-8, which means we are en route to the call. We turn on the lights and sirens if it's an emergency, and we go to the scene. When we get to the scene, we go in, we establish, one of the paramedics establishes airway, breathing, circulation, make sure that the airway is open, make sure that the person is breathing, look, listen, and feel, circulation, make sure that the heart's beating and they got a pulse. The other paramedic tries to find out what exactly happened. For instance, our child that fell down, our child that pulled the pot off the stove, try and find out what happened so we can choose the appropriate emergency care. At that point, we take vital signs such as a blood pressure, a pulse, and how fast they're breathing, put oxygen on to make sure that they get plenty of oxygen to their organs, to their system, make sure that the blood is carrying oxygen, put them on a cot or a stretcher, roll them to the ambulance, and depending on how emergent the situation is, we then will go to the hospital. Code 1, which is just driving through the streets, obeying all laws, traffic signals and such, or Code 3, which is lights and sirens, still at a safe speed, but hoping the cars will move out of the way a little bit, and if we come up to a red light and nobody's coming, then proceeding with caution through. We get to the hospital, we give a report to the doctor of what we found, what the patient condition is, what the treatment that has been done, and then hand the patient over to the physician. That's a very brief overview of what happens when you call 911 and who comes and what happens there. There has been cases of people doing prank phone calls, not just to 911, but to other places. It wouldn't be a good idea if you know anybody that has done that or is thinking about doing that, because like I said, 911 has an advanced computer system that if we had a phone here and picked it up and dialed 911 and hung up real quick, the computer can tell where that phone call came from. It'll read out 728-4102, the number that came from that phone, and they can cross-reference that or check in the computer, say, what address is that at? And they'll say, that came from the 300 block of West Main, and they will send a police car over there for fear that you picked up the phone to dial 911. You have fallen down and you are almost unconscious and you have just barely enough energy to call 911, and then you hit the floor. So they send a policeman over, very possibly fire and ambulance with that also, to make sure that the person's okay. And so that's a backup system for people that call 911 and really need emergency care but just can't follow through on it. And so be a real surprise if someone dials 911, has police, fire, and ambulance show up, and they were just playing on the phone in the den. A lot of explaining to do. It's also against the law. I don't know of any children that they've actually put in jail for a number of weeks, but it's against the law. Any questions? I had hoped to have an ambulance here so you could at least see what the ambulance looks like. Do not be afraid of fire trucks and ambulances and such. When you're at the fair, if you're at the fair, stop down over by the fair and see we've got a big ambulance there and a fire truck and a fire utility truck that does grass fires and things. Take a look at them, talk to the firemen, just people the same as you, same as your parents, just doing a job, and the lights and sirens are just there to try and move people out of the way a little bit, not to scare anybody.
Can you talk briefly about choking?
Choking. Choking happens quite often and is very serious at times. There's a few certain rules I've just learned recently now that I have a 4-month-old child, and things that if you are babysitting and feeding children, pay very close attention. If you're cutting up their food and feeding them, pay very close attention to the size of the food. One thing that I learned here recently with an older child, with hot dogs, don't just cut little hot dogs up in little pieces, because little pieces of hot dogs are just about the size of your windpipe. Swallow one of those, get it down the wrong side, they'll act just like a cork in a wine bottle. And so if you take hot dogs, cut them right down the center, and then you can cut them up and they're like little halves. That's just, same with carrots, just a little tip, kind of a little culinary tip. Choking. First you need to establish what the person's airway is like. If the universal sign for choking is this, the hands on the throat, and generally it's a natural response for anybody, whether they're a child or older, to grab for the neck if they're choking. It's just a natural reflex to grab. So that's the universal sign. You'll see it in Russia, you'll see it in Europe, you'll see it in Mexico, you'll see it across the dinner table. If somebody's choking, this is what they'll do. If a person is moving air, if the child is moving air and just they're still moving air, let them try and clear their airway. Call 911, but let them try and clear their airway. If they are not moving any air, there is first aid maneuvers that you can use depending on how old the child is. If it's an infant, it's a little more complicated to do. For an infant, what you need to do is hold the infant. There isn't anything quite small enough. Let's just for the sake of argument, this is an infant. Here's its head. Here's its bottom. The legs are out here. Hold the infant with your hands like this so you can keep the airway open, the nose open, and keep the mouth uncovered. You take the infant, you point it down a little bit. You got his nose here. He's facing down this way. His legs are on either side of the arm. You can see his bottom right here, his shoulder blades right here. And 4 firm back blows to try and dislodge whatever is in the airway. And he's pointing down, so gravity is helping to try and get whatever it is out of the airway. Fingers spread, nothing blocking the nose, nothing blocking the mouth, so this object can come out. If that doesn't work, you need to turn the child over, and right between the nipples, about a finger below the nipples is where abdominal, or excuse me, chest thrusts are done. I don't recommend this without practice and experience and having someone that teaches CPR teach this. But at a very minimum, you can at least turn them over and do those 4 back blows and then listen to see how the airway is. If it's someone older, like a friend at school, then you can use what's called the Heimlich maneuver. Can I borrow you for a sec? With the Heimlich maneuver, if she's going like this, she cannot move any air. You can't hear her moving any air. You might see her color start to change to pale or a light blue. What you do is you come behind and you ask them, can you talk? Can you speak? If they can say anything, their airway is good enough that the ambulance can get there and try and dislodge this. Because if they're still moving air, they're doing okay. Can you talk? Can you speak to me? Can you say anything? If they're, just turning blue and they can't do anything, then you come behind them, you find where the belly button is, you go just above that, take one hand with a fist, and you're going to grab the fist with your other hand like this, and you're going to do a thrust in, firm but not mean, but a firm thrust in and up. And what you're doing is you're putting pressure on the diaphragm, which is causing air in the lungs to push up, which hopefully will take that object that's in the airway and blow it out. And so and never do it on a person when you're just practicing, because you can cause some damage to a person that is not having an airway problem. So don't ever do it just to practice. You can go up behind your friends, and find the belly button. I know it's in there. There we go. And right above there, and then firm. 4. I think now the Red Cross says 6 to 8. Firm thrusts up, and that will hopefully dislodge the object. If that doesn't, the next thing, make sure 911's been called. The next thing that will probably happen is the person will pass out, and they'll need medical care to actually go down and, with what are called McGill forceps, it's just some tools we have that are curved, to go down and try and dislodge the airway. And so that's the Heimlich maneuver. If you're ever caught alone and you choke on something, the other thing you can do is, okay, thanks. The other thing you can do is take a chair and get, again, right above the umbilicus, the belly button, your navel. Put the chair right in there and force yourself down on the chair. That forces the pressure up on the diaphragm, up in the lungs, and out. So a couple airway management techniques. Always check for an airway. You don't want to be doing this to someone that already has a good airway. And don't practice for real on anybody. Questions? Any questions? Okay. Good luck, and I hope in the field that we don't cross paths. But call 911 if you need it.